The coffee exploded across Nia Bennett's chest before the clock in the marble lobby reached 9. 1 second. She was walking toward the private elevators with a sealed federal file under her arm. The next, Brad Miller had slapped the cup from her hand, grabbed the leather case stamped with her family name, and crushed it under his Italian shoe in front of half the firm. "You people always think a badge means you belong," he hissed, loud enough for the receptionist, the security guard, and every frozen associate to hear. "Sterling and Hart is not a charity office. We do not need another diversity hire pretending she earned a seat at the table." Nia stood soaked, humiliated, and silent. She did not cry. She did not move. She only looked at him with a calm so terrifying that Brad mistook it for weakness. Then he leaned closer and said the words that would end his career before sunset. "Call security. Get her out before she embarrasses the firm." Before we continue, comment what time you're watching and where in the world you're from. And don't forget to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you simply cannot miss. The lobby of Sterling and Hart LLP went so quiet that the elevator chime sounded like a judge's gavel. It was a cold Monday morning in downtown Boston, the kind of morning where black cars lined the curb, junior associates walked fast with expensive coffee, and powerful people moved through glass doors, as if the entire city had been built to keep them comfortable. The firm occupied the top floors of a tower near the harbor, a building made of marble, steel, and reputation. Its walls displayed framed awards for civil rights litigation, corporate ethics, public service, and diversity leadership. But none of those awards moved when Brad Miller stepped on Nia Bennett's court file. None of those awards spoke when he called her a diversity hire. None of those awards protected her when the man with the corner office decided she did not look like someone who belonged. Brad was 42 years old, polished, broad-shouldered, and comfortable in a way that came from years of never being interrupted when he was wrong. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than a first-year associate's monthly rent, a silver watch that flashed under the lobby lights, and a smile that never reached his eyes. At Sterling and Hart, he was known as a senior litigation partner with a brutal reputation. In public, he talked about excellence. In private, he used the word standards like a weapon. He told young attorneys they were not ready, then gave their ideas to someone else. He called black associates aggressive for being direct, then called white associates passionate for shouting in conference rooms. He praised diversity when clients were watching, then punished difference when the doors closed. That morning, he thought Nia Bennett was another person he could break quietly. That was his first mistake. His second mistake was doing it in the lobby. His third mistake was assuming her silence meant fear. Nia slowly looked down at the coffee spreading across her cream blouse and navy suit. The heat stung her skin, but she did not touch the stain. Her leather case lay open on the marble floor, one corner bent, one strap torn. Federal documents fanned beneath Brad's shoe. The gold letters on the case still read Bennett, though his heel had scraped through part of the shine. Around them, associates stood frozen with phones half raised and mouths half open. A paralegal, near the security gate, stopped breathing for a second. A client assistant backed away from the scene, as if distance could erase responsibility. At the reception desk, Kesha Johnson stared with one hand gripping the edge of the counter. Kesha had seen many things in 6 years at Sterling and Hart. She had seen partners smile at clients after reducing interns to tears. She had seen secretaries blamed for mistakes they did not make. She had seen talented attorneys of color leave with polite farewell emails that said "our opportunity" when everyone knew they meant exhaustion. But she had never seen the cruelty made this visible. Not in the lobby, not beneath the firm's diversity banner hanging 3 floors above them. Brad pointed toward the security guard. "I said call security." The guard, a former police officer named Rick Palmer, shifted uneasily. He had checked Nia's badge 10 minutes earlier. It had cleared. Her name was in the system. Her floor access was valid, but Brad was a partner. And in buildings like Sterling and Hart, authority often wore a better suit than truth. "Sir," Rick said, her badge did scan. Brad turned on him with a sharp smile. "Then maybe your scanner needs his training, too." A few people looked down. That was how men like Brad ruled rooms. They did not need everyone to agree. They only needed enough people to fear becoming next. Nia bent slowly to pick up the first stained document. Brad pressed his shoe harder against the papers. The sound of leather grinding into wet paper made Kesha flinch. Nia looked up. "Remove your foot." Her voice was soft, but something in it cut cleanly through the lobby. Brad laughed. "You do not give orders here. Those are sealed materials connected to a federal compliance hearing. You expect me to believe that. I expect you to understand that destroying court materials is not a management style. The sentence landed with more force than a shout. One young associate near the turnstiles almost smiled, then caught himself. Brad saw it. His face flushed. He leaned closer to Nia until their shadows crossed on the marble. Listen to me carefully. I do not care what piece of paper Human Resources gave you. I do not care what committee wanted your face in the brochure. I know what real lawyers look like. I know who gets into rooms like this because they earned it. And I know when someone is trying to play above her station. Nia stood fully upright. Coffee dripped from her sleeve onto the floor. Above my station, do not twist my words. I did not have to. Brad's smile vanished. He reached toward her arm. Nia stepped back half an inch. Not enough to look frightened. Enough to draw the line. Do not touch me. He grabbed her anyway. His fingers closed around her wrist, firm enough to leave marks. Careful enough that cowards in the lobby could later call it nothing. You are leaving. Nia looked at his hand, then at his face. Take your hand off me. Or what? That was when Kesha began recording. She did not make an announcement. She did not lift her phone dramatically. She placed it beside the reception monitor, angled the camera toward the lobby, and opened a live stream with hands that shook only once. The first viewers were friends, former co-workers, and a group chat of legal assistants who knew exactly what kind of building Sterling and Hart was. The numbers started at 11, then 27, then 64. The caption said, Senior Partner at Boston Law Firm, Humiliating, Black Attorney in Lobby. Brad did not notice. Men like Brad never notice the quiet people who keep receipts. Nia kept her eyes on him. Mr. Miller, I'm going to say this once. You have assaulted me, damaged confidential court documents, and made several discriminatory statements in front of witnesses. If you release me now, you may still have a chance to stop making this worse. Brad's laugh came out loud and ugly. Assault, discrimination. There it is, the magic language. You people always keep it ready. Kesha's mouth tightened behind the desk. The security guard looked away. Daniel Brooks, a second-year associate with tired eyes and a conscience he had been ignoring for months, whispered, Brad, maybe we should wait for Miss Jenkins. Brad snapped his head toward him. Did I ask you for advice? Daniel went silent. Nia watched him fold. She watched 3 other associates pretend to check email. She watched a senior woman partner step out of the elevator, see the scene, then step back inside before the doors closed. Nia had studied enough systems to know that injustice rarely survives because everyone is evil. It survives because the decent people negotiate with their fear until silence feels reasonable. Brad pulled her another step toward the security desk. Show identification. Nia opened her handbag with her free hand and removed a slim wallet. Her driver's license slid partly into view, along with a black metal credit card and a first-class boarding pass from Washington. Brad's eyes caught the card. Something bitter crossed his face. He snatched the license before she could hand it to Rick. Beacon Hill, he read, then laughed. You live in Beacon Hill. Nia said nothing. Do you know how many clients I have in Beacon Hill? Do you know how many families I know there? People like you do not just appear behind those doors. People like me do not start. You started before I arrived. Kesha's live stream reached 400 viewers. Comments flashed rapidly. Is this real? Who is he? Record his face. Send this to the bar. Is that Sterling and Hart? I used to work there. That looks like Brad Miller. Oh my God, he did this to me too. Kesha swallowed hard. The past was arriving in the comments. Brad held Nia's license like evidence of a crime. You may have fooled Human Resources, but you do not fool me. I have been in this city long enough to know when someone is trying to climb through a side door. Nia looked toward the private elevators. The doors remained closed. She knew Judge Marcus Bennett was scheduled to arrive at 10 for the Harbor Point compliance meeting with Sarah Jenkins, the firm's managing partner. She had arrived early to deliver the sealed memorandum before the hearing preparation began. She had not told Brad that Judge Bennett was her father. She had not told anyone. That had been intentional. Nia Bennett was 29 years old, brilliant, disciplined, and tired of rooms that changed their behavior only after recognizing her last name. She had graduated near the top of her class. She had clerked for a federal appellate judge. She had written briefs that made senior attorneys quietly nervous. But she had joined Sterling and Hart as a junior associate because she wanted her work to enter the room before her family legacy did. Her father had warned her. Powerful rooms reveal themselves when they believe no one powerful is watching. She had smiled when he said it. Now Brad Miller was proving him right with his hand around her wrist. Mr. Miller, Nia said, the question is simple. Are you challenging my credentials because of a security concern, or because you decided a black woman with court documents must be an intruder? The lobby seemed to inhale. Brad stared at her. Then he turned toward the few people still watching. Do you hear this? She walks into our firm, causes a scene, refuses basic procedures, and now she is accusing me of racism because I asked who she was. Nia looked at the coffee on her clothes. You poured coffee on me before asking for identification. The cup slipped. You called me a diversity hire. I said Sterling has standards. You told security to remove me before verifying my badge. Because you were disruptive. You stepped on sealed federal documents. Because I did not believe they were real. And now you are changing your story because people are listening. Brad's face hardened. You think you are clever. No, I am precise. That sentence made something in him snap. He released her wrist, but only to snatch the leather case from the floor and lift it in front of everyone. The torn strap dangled. Coffee ran from one corner. This is what you brought in here. A costume prop. A little gold name on a bag, a few printed pages, and an attitude. Let me tell you something, Miss Bennett, if that is even your real name. Sterling and Hart was built by people who did not need pity to succeed. We do not lower the bar because someone cries discrimination. We do not hand power to people who use race as a shield. And we do not let strangers walk into the lobby pretending to be lawyers. Nia's expression did not change, but her voice grew colder. You should put that case down. Brad smiled. Why? Does Daddy own it? For the first time, Nia blinked slowly. It was not fear. It was recognition. The room had reached the point where a man's character could no longer be misunderstood. Yes, she said. Brad laughed. Of course, there is always a daddy, some donor, some activist, some politician, somebody who made a call. Nia looked beyond him at the elevator bank. A private elevator chimed. The doors opened. Sarah Jenkins stepped out first, dressed in a charcoal suit, carrying a red folder and the controlled expression of a woman used to being obeyed. She was 54, respected, feared, and known across Boston as a managing partner who could cut a negotiation in half with one sentence. Beside her stepped Judge Marcus Bennett. The air changed before anyone spoke. Marcus Bennett was 62, tall, broad-shouldered, and quiet in the way thunder is quiet before it arrives. His skin was deep brown, his close-cut hair silver at the temples, his eyes dark and steady. He wore a black overcoat over a charcoal suit, with no ornament except a small pin shaped like the scales of justice. He had spent decades in American courtrooms, first defending people nobody wanted to defend, then prosecuting officials nobody thought could be touched, then serving as a federal judge whose opinions law students read because they sounded like conscience sharpened into law. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. When he stepped into a room, people remembered that words had consequences. Sarah stopped mid-sentence when she saw the lobby. Her eyes moved from Nia's stained suit to Brad's hand, holding the ruined case to the court papers beneath his shoe. The red folder lowered slowly in her hand. Marcus looked at the same things. His face did not change. That was worse. Brad turned and saw them. His entire body rearranged itself into respect. Miss Jenkins, Judge Bennett, I apologize for the disturbance. We had a security issue. I was handling a trespasser who was claiming to be associated with the firm. Marcus walked forward with measured steps. The lobby parted without instruction. He stopped beside the stained documents. He looked down at the visible seal from his chambers. Then he looked at Nia. His eyes softened for less than a second, so briefly only a daughter would have seen it. Then the judge returned. Miss Bennett, he said, are you injured? Brad went still. The words reached him slowly. Miss Bennett. Not trespasser, not stranger, not diversity hire. Miss Bennett. Nia straightened despite the coffee drying against her skin. No serious injury, Your Honor. Marcus looked at the red mark on her wrist. That was not my question. Nia held his gaze. I am angry. Marcus nodded once. Good. Anger can be useful if it does not drive. Sarah looked from Marcus to Nia, then to Brad. Her face lost color. Brad swallowed. Judge Bennett, I had no idea. Marcus turned his full attention to him. No idea about what? Brad opened his mouth, closed it. Tried again. No idea she was connected to you. The sentence hung in the lobby like a confession, written by accident. Marcus stepped closer. Did you need to know she was connected to me in order to treat her like a lawyer? Brad's lips parted. Nothing came out. Marcus looked at the ruined case in Brad's hand. Put that down. Brad obeyed immediately. The case hit the marble softly. Nia watched the transformation with no satisfaction. That was what disgusted her most. Brad had not become ashamed when he saw her pain. He became afraid when he recognized power behind it. Sarah's voice came low and deadly. Brad, what happened here? He turned toward her, desperate to recover authority. She entered with unidentified materials. She became confrontational. I asked for identification. The situation escalated. I may have been firm, but I was protecting the firm. Keisha looked at her phone. The live stream had crossed 3,000 viewers before she ended it under Sarah's stare, but the recording was saved. The comments were still multiplying. Former associates were naming incidents. Former staff were confirming patterns. The truth had left the building already. Sarah looked at Kesha. "Were you recording?" Kesha's throat moved. "Yes, Miss Jenkins." Brad snapped. "You had no right." Sarah lifted one finger without looking at him. "Do not speak to her." Brad stopped. Sarah's voice stayed calm. "Save the recording. To General Counsel. Send one copy to me. Preserve the original." Kesha nodded, stunned. Marcus bent and picked up one stained page. He read the heading, then handed it to Sarah. "This document was delivered under court instruction for the Harbor Point compliance matter. It appears your partner placed his shoe on it." Sarah took the paper as if it might cut her. "Your Honor, the firm will address this immediately. The court will expect more than address." Sarah nodded. "Understood." Marcus looked at Brad. "Mr. Miller, I want to be clear. The court heard you identify Ms. Bennett as a trespasser. The lobby heard you use language tied to race and belonging. There is video. There are witnesses. There are damaged court materials. If you speak again, I recommend you choose accuracy over instinct." Brad's throat worked. "Your Honor, I made a mistake." Nia looked at him. "No, you made a decision, then you made another." Sarah turned toward the elevators. "Conference room 1. Now." Nobody argued. Brad walked ahead like a man trying not to stumble. Nia gathered the damaged papers. Marcus moved to help, but she shook her head slightly. He understood. She needed to stand inside the consequence without being rescued from it. Kesha came around the reception desk and quietly handed Nia a clean cloth. Their eyes met. No speeches passed between them. Only recognition. Nia wiped coffee from the top page, placed everything back into the torn leather case, and stepped into the elevator with Brad, Sarah, Marcus, and a silence so heavy it felt like a verdict waiting for language. Conference room 1 sat on the 37th floor with a view of Boston Harbor. Clients loved that room because it made them feel above the city. That morning, the windows only made everyone easier to see. Sarah took the head of the table. Marcus sat to her right, not as a father, but as the federal judge whose court had placed trust in Sterling and Hart. Nia sat across from Brad. Brad chose the chair nearest the door. That told Nia enough. Rachel Adams, the firm's general counsel, arrived 4 minutes later with a laptop, a legal pad, and the expression of someone who had been pulled out of another emergency, only to find a larger one waiting. Daniel Brooks was summoned as a witness. Kesha joined remotely from a small office near reception, still shaken but steady. Sarah began. "This meeting is being recorded for internal review. Ms. Bennett, do you consent?" "Yes, Judge Bennett." Marcus nodded. "For purposes of court preservation, yes." Brad leaned forward. "I do not consent to being ambushed." Rachel looked at him. "Brad, given the circumstances, I strongly advise you not to frame this as something happening to you." He sat back. Sarah's gaze stayed on him. "Ms. Bennett, please deliver the court materials." Nia opened the ruined case. The room watched coffee-stained documents slide onto the polished table. The visual alone was devastating. She removed a sealed envelope and placed it in front of Sarah. "The court requires certification by noon that Sterling and Hart has preserved all internal communications, staffing records, complaints, performance reviews, partner notes, and client communications related to the Harbor Point monitoring engagement. The court also requests disclosure of any internal conduct that could compromise the firm's ability to monitor civil rights compliance with independence and credibility." Sarah opened the envelope. Her eyes moved across the page. Rachel leaned closer and read over her shoulder. Brad frowned. "Internal conduct." Nia turned to him. "Yes." Brad forced a laugh. "This is ridiculous." Marcus looked at him. "Mr. Miller, one quiet warning." Brad shut his mouth. Nia connected her tablet to the conference screen. A folder appeared. Sterling Culture Review. Sarah's expression shifted. "Ms. Bennett, what is this?" "Context," Brad scoffed. "She prepared a hit piece." Nia did not look at him. "When I accepted my rotation, I reviewed publicly available information, alumni statements, departure patterns, and anonymized accounts from former employees. I did that because Sterling and Hart is monitoring a discrimination-related matter while marketing itself as a leader in equity and professional ethics. I wanted to understand whether the institution judging bias elsewhere had examined bias within itself." Rachel stopped typing. Sarah stared at the screen. Marcus folded his hands. Nia clicked once. The first chart appeared. Over the last 2 years, the corporate litigation group under Mr. Miller's supervision lost nearly 3 times as many associates of color as white associates. Official explanations included culture fit, performance mismatch, and insufficient resilience. But exit interviews describe exclusion from client meetings, shifting standards, public humiliation, racially coded feedback, and denial of mentorship. Brad shook his head. "Exit interviews are emotional. People who fail blame the system. Nia clicked again. 7 complaint summaries appeared, names redacted, dates visible. These are formal complaints filed against Mr. Miller or attorneys working under him. 4 were closed without witness interviews. 2 were closed after the complainants resigned. 1 was referred to a partner committee that included Mr. Miller's closest business ally. Sarah turned to Rachel. Is this accurate? Rachel's face tightened. But the dates align with matters I remember. Brad looked offended. Sarah, you cannot seriously let a junior associate put the firm on trial. Sarah's voice cut across the table. You put the firm on trial in the lobby. Nia clicked again. A still image from the livestream filled the screen. Brad was leaning over her, mouth open, finger pointed. Auto-generated captions showed the words diversity hire. Another still showed his shoe on the documents. Another showed his hand around her wrist. The room changed. There is a difference between hearing about cruelty and seeing it paused under fluorescent light. Brad stared at himself on the screen and seemed for the first time unable to edit the scene in his own mind. Nia let the image remain. This is not a misunderstanding. This is a pattern caught in public. Brad's voice lowered. I was under pressure. So was I. I did not know who you were. That is the point. He looked away. Sarah removed her glasses and placed them carefully on the table. Brad, did you pour coffee on Miss Bennett? He inhaled. It spilled during an exchange. Rachel said, Brad. He closed his eyes. Yes. Did you refer to her as a diversity hire? Silence. Yes. Did you tell security to remove her? Yes. Did you put your shoe on documents after being told they were connected to a federal hearing? I did not believe her. Marcus spoke. You did not believe her because of what? Brad looked at him because the situation seemed suspicious. Marcus waited. The room waited with him. Brad's confidence had nowhere to go. Because I made assumptions. Marcus nodded. Closer. Brad swallowed. Because she did not look like what I expected. Nia's face stayed still. Expected for what? Brad looked at the table. For someone carrying federal court materials into this firm. For a lawyer, Nia said. Brad did not answer. He did not have to. The silence became an admission. Sarah leaned back slowly. Rachel, exposure. Rachel did not soften the list. Hostile work environment, discrimination, retaliation depending on prior complaints, physical contact, destruction or damage of court-supervised materials, possible bar, reporting obligations, reputational harm, client impact, risk to the Harbor Point appointment, potential sanctions if preservation is mishandled. Brad's face drained. Sanctions. Marcus said, the court takes preservation seriously. Brad turned to Sarah. I have spent 8 years building this practice. Nia looked at the torn case. You spent 8 years confusing fear with respect. He looked at her, wounded and angry. You do not know me. I know what you do when you think someone has no power. That sentence stopped him. Not because it was loud, because it was exact. Sarah pushed back from the table and stood by the window. Below them, Boston moved on, indifferent to another powerful man's panic. When she turned back, she looked older. Brad, effective immediately, you are suspended from all duties pending executive committee review. You will have no contact with Ms. Bennett, Ms. Johnson, Mr. Brooks, prior complainants, or anyone connected to this inquiry. You will surrender your firm laptop and phone to IT. Rachel will preserve all communications. I will recommend termination for cause. Brad stood halfway. Sarah, please. I have a family. I have a mortgage. My clients depend on me. Nia's voice was low. So did the people you pushed out. He turned on her. Do you want me destroyed? She finally showed emotion, but not the one he expected. It was grief, not for him. For everyone who had been forced to carry rooms like this alone. I want you held responsible. If responsibility destroys the version of you that needed other people small, then maybe that version should not survive. Brad sat down as if his legs had failed. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Daniel Brooks cleared his throat. Sarah looked at him. Mr. Brooks, Daniel's face was pale. I need to say something. Brad closed his eyes. Daniel. Daniel shook his head. No. I have been quiet too long. His voice trembled, but it did not stop. This was not the first time. Brad called Malcolm Reed aggressive in a review for questioning a weak argument. He called Emily Carter impressive for doing the same thing 2 days later. He told Angela Brooks she was lucky to have a job after she corrected a citation he got wrong. He asked Kesha if she was part of a community hiring program. He told staff not to send certain associates to client meetings because the client expected polish. Everyone knew what polish meant. Brad whispered, Stop. Daniel looked at him with wet eyes. I should have stopped you. That hit harder than accusation. Kesha's image on the screen remained still. Then she spoke. He told me I should smile, because clients get nervous when reception looks hostile. I asked if I had done something wrong. He said I should not make everything racial. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. Rachel typed faster. Nia looked at Kesha with quiet gratitude. Brad covered his face with one hand. At first, Nia thought it was another performance. Then his shoulders dropped in a way that looked less like strategy and more like collapse. When he lowered his hand, his eyes were red. I thought I was demanding excellence. Nias said nothing. Marcus said nothing. Brad looked around the room, as if hoping someone would save him from the sentence forming inside him. No one did. I thought people were too sensitive. I thought I was protecting standards. I thought if someone could not handle pressure, they did not belong here. But I was not hard on everyone the same way. His voice cracked. I was harder on people I already doubted before they spoke. Nia watched carefully. Remorse and self-pity often wear the same face at first. Say it plainly, she said. Brad looked at her. I was racist. The word changed the room, not because it solved anything, because it finally named the thing everyone had been circling like a dangerous animal. Brad said it again, quieter. I was racist. Not in the way I imagined racist looked, not with slurs in public or hate groups or signs. I was racist in evaluations, in assumptions, in jokes, in who I mentored, in who I doubted, in who I believed, in who I punished for confidence. He looked at Kesha on the screen. In who I thought I could disrespect without consequence. Kesha did not forgive him. She only nodded once, because acknowledgement is not absolution. Sarah returned to the table. That admission will be included in the record of this meeting. Brad looked terrified again. Marcus leaned forward. Do not retreat because the truth now has consequences. The truth had consequences before. Other people were paying them. Brad stared at the table. What do I do? Nia answered before anyone else. You stop asking the people you harmed to guide your redemption. He looked up. Then what? You cooperate. You tell the truth. You accept consequences. You apologize without asking forgiveness. You repair what can be repaired and live with what cannot. You learn to do right when nobody is impressed. Brad nodded slowly. It was the first time all morning he did not look like a partner protecting status. He looked like a man standing in the ruins of a lie he had mistaken for success. Sarah ended the meeting with instructions precise enough to satisfy law and cold enough to satisfy anger. Brad was escorted to his office by Rachel and security. He was allowed to collect personal items under supervision. His laptop stayed, his phone stayed, his access card was disabled before he reached the elevator. By noon, Sterling and Hart certified preservation to the court. By 1, the executive committee convened. By 2, the lobby video had reached legal Twitter, local news, civil rights attorneys, former employees, and clients whose general counsel began calling Sarah's direct line. By 3, Brad Miller's biography disappeared from the firm's website. By 4, he was terminated for cause. But the story did not end there, because firing one man is the easiest way for an institution to pretend it has changed. Marcus Bennett knew that. Nia knew it better now. At 5:30, Sarah Jenkins gathered every Boston employee in the 20th floor auditorium and connected the firm's offices in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and Washington by video. Lawyers stood beside assistants. Paralegals stood beside partners. Staff who were usually invisible sat near the front because Kesha had told them to. Nia stood at the back in a borrowed black blazer over her coffee-stained blouse. Marcus stood near the side wall, present but not central. This was not his speech to give. Sarah stepped forward without notes. This morning, she said, a senior partner at Sterling and Hart racially degraded, physically intimidated, and humiliated a junior attorney in our lobby. Many of you have seen the video. Some of you have lived quieter versions of it. The room tightened. Nobody clapped. Nobody moved. Sarah continued. Brad Miller has been terminated for cause. That is not enough. Termination is not transformation. It is only removal. The harder truth is that people warned this firm. Complaints were filed. Patterns were visible. Departures were explained away. Revenue protected reputation. Fear protected power. And leadership, including me, failed to confront what was happening with the urgency it deserved. That sentence did what corporate apologies rarely do. It named responsibility without hiding inside passive voice. Nia watched people listen with suspicion. She respected that suspicion. Institutions do not earn trust with one honest speech. Sarah announced an independent investigation, reopening of prior complaints, direct reporting to the executive committee, anti-retaliation protections, review of evaluation language, transparent promotion data, staff listening sessions, and court disclosure. Then she looked toward the back of the room. Ms. Bennett did not ask to become the symbol of this firm's failure today. I will not force that role on her, but she has the floor if she wants it. All eyes turned. Nia could have declined. She almost did. She was tired. Her wrist hurt. Her blouse still smelled faintly of coffee. She wanted silence, not a microphone. But then she saw Kesha. She saw Daniel. She saw a young black associate near the test door watching with the cautious hope of someone who had learned not to hope too early. Nia walked forward. She did not take the podium. She stood beside it. "I am not here to absolve this firm," she said. "And I am not here to turn humiliation into branding. What happened to me this morning was public. That is the only reason some people are calling it shocking. But there are people in this room who know that disrespect does not need an audience to be real. Bias does not need a slur to be damaging. Exclusion does not need a written policy to become a system." The auditorium stayed silent. Her voice remained steady. "I have heard people say law firms are hard places. That is true. The work is demanding, deadlines are unforgiving, clients are anxious, judges are exacting. But difficulty is not an excuse for cruelty. Excellence does not require humiliation. Standards do not require racism. Professionalism does not mean staying quiet while someone else is stripped of dignity in front of you." Daniel lowered his eyes. Kesha wiped one tear quickly, angry that it escaped. Nia continued. "Some of you saw what happened and looked away. Some of you have looked away before. I understand fear. Fear is human. But when fear becomes habit, it becomes cooperation. And every time decent people cooperate with cruelty, cruel people mistake silence for permission." The sentence moved through the room like a door opening. "So do not clap for me today if you plan to whisper tomorrow. Do not praise courage in public and punish it in reviews. Do not put diversity on the website and call it risk when it speaks. Do not ask the wounded to become patient so the comfortable can change slowly. If this firm wants to become better, it will have to become honest first." She stopped. For a moment, nobody reacted. Then Kesha stood, not clapping yet, just standing. Daniel stood next, a paralegal, a first-year associate, an assistant. Then rows of people rose until the auditorium was on its feet. Applause came, but Nia did not smile. Applause was not justice, it was only sound. The work would begin when the room emptied. That night, after the reporters outside had thinned, and most employees had gone home, Nia returned to the lobby. The cleaning crew had polished the marble until no trace of coffee remained. That bothered her. Harm always wanted to be cleaned quickly. The leather case sat on the reception desk where she had left it, torn folded beneath the cracked flap. Kesha stood behind the desk, coat on, bag over her shoulder. "I can put it somewhere safe," she said. Nia touched the scraped gold letters. "No. Leave it here tonight. You want people to see it. I want people to remember the floor was clean before he did it too." Keisha nodded. Marcus approached from the elevators. Without the courtroom around him, he looked older and more human, like a father who had spent the day not reaching for his child because he respected the woman she had become. "You should get that wrist checked," he said. Nia looked down at the faint bruising. "I will. That means you will think about it. It means I will." Marcus gave her the look he used on witnesses who thought they could charm him. Nia almost smiled. Kesha excused herself, but Nia stopped her. "Thank you for recording." Kesha looked uncomfortable. "I was scared." "You did it scared. I almost ended it when he looked over, but you did not." Kesha's eyes filled. "He did things like that before. Not always that loud, but enough. I kept thinking someone upstairs would care." Sarah Jenkins, approaching quietly from the far end of the lobby, heard the last sentence. She stopped beside them. "Someone upstairs should have." Kesha looked at her, guarded. Sarah accepted the look. "I am sorry, Ms. Johnson. Not in a press release way. In the way that means I expect you to tell the investigator everything, including every time my office ignored something it should not have ignored." Kesha studied her. "And if it makes partners look bad. Especially then." Nia watched the exchange. Trust did not appear, but a path did. Sarah turned to Nia. "I meant what I said earlier. I would like you to stay." Nia laughed once, tired and sharp. "That is a bold request after your partner tried to throw me out of the building." Sarah nodded. "It is, and you have every reason to leave. Why should I stay?" Sarah looked around the lobby, the awards, the glass, the reception desk, the ruined case, because if every person with a conscience leaves broken institutions become inheritance for people like Brad. Nia did not answer quickly. Marcus said nothing. He had taught her never to let another person's urgency become her decision. Finally, Nia said, "I will stay through the investigation. After that, I decide based on what changes, not what is promised." Sarah nodded. "Fair." "No," Nia said. "Necessary." Sarah accepted the correction. 3 days later, Brad Miller returned to Sterling and Hart through the public entrance. He had no badge, no assistant, no confident stride. The security guard called upstairs before allowing him past reception. Kesha watched him from behind the desk. The same lobby that had once bent around his authority now held him at the threshold like any other visitor. He looked at the leather case displayed temporarily in a glass evidence box near reception. His face tightened. Sarah had approved a 5-minute meeting in a small conference room near the lobby. Rachel Adams attended. Nia did not have to, she chose to. Kesha was there too because Nia asked if she wanted to be. Brad entered carrying a plain envelope. He looked thinner, though only days had passed. Shame can age a face faster than time. He sat only after Rachel told him to. For a moment he stared at his hands, then he looked at Nia. "I am not here to ask for my job back." Nia said nothing. "I am not here to ask you to forgive me." Kesha folded her arms. "Good." Brad nodded. "I deserve that." He placed the envelope on the table. "This is a list of people I remember harming. Not everyone, probably, but the ones I can name. I am giving the same list to the investigator and the bar." Rachel confirmed with a small nod. Nia did not touch the envelope. "Why bring it to me?" "Because I wanted to say, without lawyers writing it for me, that you were right. I was not sorry in the lobby. I was scared. I was sorry I picked the wrong person. I was sorry your father walked out of that elevator. I was sorry there was video. I was not sorry enough for what I did to you." His voice shook. "That came later. When I watched the recording alone. When I heard my own voice. When I read old complaints and recognized the same phrases I used on you. Culture fit, tone, Polish, judgment, resilience. I had turned prejudice into professional vocabulary." Nia listened. This was better than panic. Still, better was not enough. "And what happens after you say that?" Brad swallowed. "I cooperate. I accept discipline. I self-reported to the bar yesterday. I have started volunteering at a legal clinic in Roxbury under supervision. Not as a lawyer giving advice. Intake work, basic forms. Listening." Kesha looked skeptical. "Sounds like image repair." Brad flinched. "It might have started that way in my head. I do not know. That is the part that scares me. I can make anything about protecting myself if I am not careful." Nia saw something real in that sentence. Not redemption, awareness. A small and painful beginning. Brad looked at Kesha. "Ms. Johnson, I humiliated you, more than once. I made comments about your tone, your smile, your place here. I treated your job as if it made you less intelligent than me. I am sorry." Kesha's face stayed hard. "You made me feel like the front desk was a cage." Brad's eyes lowered. I know, she said. "You know now." "I knew then." He nodded. "You are right." He turned to Nia. "Ms. Bennett, I assaulted you, degraded you, and tried to erase your credibility. I did that because I believed my status made my assumptions safer than your truth. I am sorry. I know that does not repair it." Nia leaned back. "Do not make your apology the center of my injury." Brad absorbed the sentence. "I understand." "No, you are beginning to." He nodded. "I am beginning to." That was the only honest answer he had given without decoration. When he left, he did not offer his hand. That, more than anything, told Nia he had listened. He walked out past the glass box, holding the ruined Bennett case. He stopped in front of it for a moment, read the temporary note beneath it, then continued through the revolving doors into the cold Boston afternoon without looking back. Weeks became months. Sterling and Hart did not become pure. No institution becomes righteous because one ugly moment goes viral. But the investigation did what public embarrassment alone could not. It forced documents into light. It reopened complaints. It revealed how many people had translated fear into silence, and silence into policy. 2 partners resigned. 1 practice leader was removed from management. Human resources changed reporting channels. Evaluation committees were restructured. Staff were included in culture reviews. Promotion data was shared internally for the first time. Former employees were contacted. Some accepted apologies. Some accepted settlements. Some refused to take the firm's call, and nobody had the right to blame them. Healing is not a performance owed to the people who delayed it. Kesha from reception into professional development after Sarah learned she had been quietly mentoring junior staff for years. Daniel Brooks became awkwardly brave, which was better than smoothly cowardly. He interrupted coded language in meetings. He documented concerns. He admitted when he had failed. Some partnered and annoying. Nia considered that progress. Sarah Jenkins changed too, though not in speeches. She began asking different questions. Who is missing from this meeting? Who gets interrupted? Who receives credit? Which complaints close too fast? Which exits are we explaining too comfortably? It did not make her beloved, it made her useful. That mattered more. Nia stayed. Not because the firm deserved her loyalty, but because the work deserved witnesses with spines. She became known not as Judge Bennett's daughter, though some still whispered it, but as the associate who could make a conference room stop hiding behind language. In the Harbor Point matter, she helped expose how claims from minority neighborhoods had been flagged for extra review under a supposedly neutral system, trained on biased historical data. Executives tried to call it unintended disparity. Nia called it harm. Consultants tried to call it legacy process. Nia called it evidence. One afternoon, during a status conference in federal court, Marcus Bennett asked her to summarize the central lesson of the monitoring report. She stood at counsel table, in a dark suit, her new leather case beside her. The old one remained in the firm lobby, now displayed permanently beneath a small plaque. Nia looked at the executives, the lawyers, the former claimants, the reporters, and the staff members seated in the back. The central lesson, she said, is that discrimination does not survive only through hatred. It survives through habits, through unchecked assumptions, through procedures nobody audits because they sound neutral, through professionals who use polished language to hide unequal outcomes, through leaders who wait for public proof instead of believing private warnings. A system does not have to announce cruelty in order to produce it, but once the evidence is clear, refusal to change becomes a choice. Mark watched her from the bench, and for the first time that day, his face allowed the smallest trace of pride. Not because she sounded like him, because she sounded like herself. After the hearing, he met her in the courthouse hallway. Boston sunlight fell through tall windows onto the stone floor. Lawyers passed around them, speaking in low voices. Marcus handed her a new leather case, dark brown. Simple no gold lettering. Nia ran her hand over it. No name, Marcus smiled. You already know who you are. She looked at him. I wanted to prove myself without your shadow. You did. Brad changed when you walked in. Marcus nodded. Power often hears power before it hears truth. That is why power has a duty to make truth louder, not itself bigger. Nia looked down the hallway. Do you think he really changed? Marcus considered it. Some people confuse shame with transformation. Shame is what they feel when the mirror appears. Transformation is what they do after the mirror is gone. And Brad, time will testify. Months later, Time offered a small statement. Brad Miller did not return to corporate law. His bar discipline remained pending. His former clients moved on. His name no longer opened doors the way it once had. On Tuesday mornings, he sat in a legal clinic in Roxbury entering intake notes for tenants facing eviction, workers denied wages, patients crushed by medical debt, and families who had learned that systems can be polite while destroying you. He was not celebrated there. He was corrected often. He was given basic tasks. He listened more than he spoke because the clinic director, a woman named Denise Walker, told him on his first day that redemption speeches were not a service they provided. One morning, a young black tenant explained that her property manager called her aggressive for asking repairs to be completed. Brad's fingers stopped over the keyboard. He heard himself in a voice that was not his. He did not interrupt. He did not tell her he understood. He did not make the moment about his growth. He simply typed her words accurately and asked, "What happened next?" It was not enough to erase anything, but it was the first honest service he had performed without needing to be seen. Back at Sterling and Hart, the ruined Bennett case became part of new employee orientation, not as inspirational decoration. Nia refused that. It was shown after the policy section, when Sarah Jenkins entered the room and told new associates the truth. This firm once ignored warnings until harm became public. This case is here to remind us that polished floors do not prove clean foundations. If you see something, report it. If you report something, we will document it. If leadership fails you, the failure will be recorded, too. Then Keshka spoke to every new class about staff dignity. Daniel spoke about bystander. Silence, Nia spoke only sometimes. When she did, she never softened the lesson. Do not wait until the person being mistreated has a famous father, she told them. Do not wait until there is video. Do not wait until the room feels safe. Character is what you do before consequences arrive. The line spread through the firm faster than any official motto. It appeared on sticky notes, in training slides, in whispered reminders before difficult meetings. Character is what you do before consequences arrive. 1 year after the morning in the lobby, Sterling and Hart held a public forum on accountability in the legal profession. Nia did not want the event named after her. She did not want her face on the invitation. She agreed to speak only if former employees were invited first, and staff were seated with attorneys, not behind them. The auditorium filled. Reporters came, law students came, former associates came, including some who had left wounded, and returned only because they wanted to see whether the firm could listen without defending itself. Marcus Bennett sat in the third row, not on stage. He had refused the stage. "This is your room," he told Nia. Sarah opened with facts, not flattery. Complaints reopened, settlements reached, policies changed, partners removed, data published, work unfinished. Then Nia stepped forward. She paused long enough for the room to settle. 1 year ago, she said, A man poured coffee on me in a lobby because he thought I was safe to humiliate. He was wrong about me, but he had been right about the system for a long time. The system had taught him that certain people could be doubted, dismissed, delayed, and degraded without meaningful consequence. That is why the lesson cannot be only that Brad Miller was bad. That lesson is too easy. The harder lesson is that Brad Miller was allowed. The auditorium went still. He was allowed by fear, by profit, by hierarchy, by people who laughed to survive, by people who stayed quiet to advance, by people who filed complaints into drawers and called delay process, by leaders who prefer surprise over responsibility. The question is not whether your institution has someone capable of cruelty. Every institution does. The question is whether your institution feeds him, flatters him, promotes him, excuses him, and hands him power over the people he is most likely to harm. She looked toward the back of the room where young associates stood along the wall. And if you are watching this because you have been humiliated, in a lobby, a meeting, a classroom, a hospital, a courthouse, a restaurant, or any place where someone mistook your dignity for something they could approve or deny, hear me clearly. Their failure to recognize your worth does not reduce it. Their title does not make their prejudice intelligent. Their cruelty does not become truth because others were silent. Stand still if you can. Document what you can. Find witnesses where you can. But never let the worst person in the room become the author of your identity. Marcus lowered his eyes. Kesha smiled through tears. Sarah sat with hands folded, receiving the words not as praise, but as instruction. Nia continued, the law matters, ethics matters, accountability matters. But humanity matters before all of it. Because the law at its best is society saying that power does not get the final word simply because it speaks first. That morning, Brad spoke first. He spoke loudly. He spoke cruelly. But he did not get the final word. She stepped back from the microphone. The room rose, but this time the applause felt different. Not celebratory. Responsible. Like people understood, they were not clapping for a finished story. They were agreeing to be witnesses in the next one. After the forum, Naya walked alone through the lobby. The marble still shone. The glass still reflected wealth. The firm name still gleamed above reception. But beside the desk stood the glass case holding the damaged leather file. The plaque beneath it read, "Dignity must never depend on title." Kesha had chosen the words. Nia stopped in front of it. In the reflection, she saw Mark approach behind her. "You did well," he said. Nia smiled. "As a lawyer or as your daughter?" "Yes," she laughed softly. Then the laughter faded. "I still think about that first second, the coffee, the sound it made, the way nobody moved." Marcus stood beside her. Trauma often returns as sound. So does truth. He nodded yes, if we let it. They stood there together, father and daughter, judge and lawyer, legacy and future, beneath the lights of a firm that had been forced to see itself. Nia touched the glass lightly. She no longer saw only humiliation when she looked at the case. She saw Kesha's phone turning toward the truth. She saw Daniel finding his voice too late but not never. She saw Sarah choosing exposure over concealment. She saw Brad naming his prejudice without being allowed to turn confession into escape. She saw her own stillness, not as weakness but as discipline under fire. The morning had begun with a man trying to define her place. It ended by exposing his. That was the story people remembered. But the deeper story was quieter. It was about what happens after the viral moment fades, after the comments stop, after the apology is issued, after the powerful room rearranges its furniture and tries to look clean again. The deeper story asks whether dignity becomes policy, whether courage becomes habit, whether witnesses become actors, whether leaders become accountable, whether remorse becomes labor, whether pain becomes wisdom without being turned into decoration. Nia Bennett carried that question into every room she entered. She carried it into boardrooms, courtrooms, elevators, interviews, and late-night drafting sessions when the city outside went dark and the work still demanded precision. She learned that justice is rarely one dramatic victory. More often, it is a record built line by line, a complaint preserved, a witness believed, a pattern named, a policy changed, a person stopped before they can harm the next person. A room taught that silence is not neutral, and somewhere in Boston, in a clinic waiting room with flickering lights, Brad Miller continued typing the stories of people he once would have ignored. He was not forgiven by everyone. He was not restored to what he had lost. He was living inside consequence, which is where accountability begins. Some days he hated it. Some days he understood it. On the better days, he remembered Nia's words. Do the work quietly, without applause, without expecting the people you harmed to supervise your redemption. That was the closest thing to mercy she had given him, and it was harder than punishment. Years later, when younger attorneys asked Nia What made her stay calm that morning? They expected a simple answer. Training, confidence, family legacy, faith, discipline. She usually told them the truth. I was not calm because I felt nothing. I was calm because I refused to hand him control of what I felt. There is a difference. Then she would add the lesson Marcus Bennett had given her long before the coffee hit the floor. Never confuse kindness with weakness. Never confuse silence with surrender. And never assume marble walls can hide rot forever. In law, evidence has a way of rising. In life, character has a way of revealing itself. The only question is whether you will be proud of what the record shows when the room finally starts watching.